Varka is finally on the table. And in this video, I'm going to break down his kit from the ground up, not just reading abilities, but showing how the mechanics connect, what kind of loop he's built to run, and what the experience will actually feel like once you put him on field. By the end, you'll know where his damage really comes from, what his skill state changes, and why it matters, how his talents push your team comps in specific directions, and what his constellations actually do to the way he plays. Let's start with the first thing people overlook. His base stats already tell the story. Varka's base ATK is absurdly high, around 399, and his HP/def aren't flimsy either. That's a very deliberate signal. He's built to scale hard through attack, not to rely on gimmicky reactions or one-element amplifiers to function. Even the crit presentation points toward a classic carry build, but the real takeaway is simple. ATK matters for him more than it does for most characters. Normal attacks. Fast cadence, not heavy swings. His normal attack string, Favonius Blade Work, Dazzling Dance, is a 5-hit sequence with twin blades. Even before animations, the naming and structure suggest a quick, flowing combo, not slow, weighty claymore pacing. His charged attack is a stamina-consuming forward dash/slash. On its own, it's fine, but it becomes much more important once his skill is online. Plunge exists like usual, but there's a catch you need to understand early. Plunging isn't part of his real kit once you enter his main state. That matters for how you pilot him. The real kit begins with his elemental skill. Everything about Varka's gameplay hinges on his skill. Gale's End. Tap it, and he surges forward, hits an AoE burst of Anemo damage, and enters a special stance, Gale Rush Mode. And this is not one of those small buff for few seconds skills. This stance is the entire design. Once you're in Gale Rush, the rules of the character change immediately. His normal attack damage gets boosted. Plunging is disabled, and his attacks shift into mixed element damage patterns. Mixed damage. Locked conversion based on team elements. While Gale Rush is active, Varka's normal and charged attacks deal 2 layers of elemental damage. One layer is always Anemo. The second layer depends on your team. If your party includes Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo, his other blade converts into that element's damage. The key detail here, this isn't an infusion you can override. It's locked into his kit, meaning external infusions won't replace it. That makes his damage profile far more stable, but it also means team building is part of the weapon. And there's another shift tied to this. If you do have a Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo teammate, Gale's End itself changes while the stance is active. Once Gale Rush is active, your skill button doesn't behave normally anymore. Instead of the standard version, Varka unlocks a new skill, For Winds Arise. This one is built like a stance action skill. It deals damage on cast, and it also applies the secondary element his kit is pulling from your party. The important limitation is that it comes with its own cooldown and a limited number of uses, so you're not just spamming it forever, you're managing charges. And those charges feed into the next mechanic. Varka can spend uses of For Winds Arise to launch a special charged attack called Azure Devour. This is where his intended playstyle stops being subtle. Azure Devour doesn't cost stamina, hits multiple times, and each hit deals a combination of Anemo plus the party-linked element. So the game plan becomes clear. Varka isn't designed to bounce around, disengage, or fish for plunge setups once he's online. His kit pushes you to stay grounded, keep cycling normal/charged attacks, and convert that momentum into more stance actions. Hold skill, movement tool, not your damage engine. He also has a hold version of Gale's End, where charging increases the distance of his forward leap. Functionally, it reads more like positioning and exploration tech than a combat-defining mechanic. It helps you relocate, it helps you traverse, but it doesn't look like it changes what his damage loop is trying to do. The numbers back up the design philosophy. Even the scaling layout supports this repeat actions identity. Gale's End has separate tap/hold cooldown behavior. Gale Rush has a fixed stance duration. His enhanced normals are broken into multiple damage instances, and each instance carries Anemo plus the linked element. Then 4 Winds Arise and Azure Devour both follow that same pattern. Multi-hit, repeatable output. Not one huge nuke. It's sustained pressure. Elemental Burst. Useful, but not the centerpiece. His burst, I Am the Northwind, is actually pretty simple in comparison. It's a 2-hit slash that deals a Nemo twice. But if your party includes Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo, then the first hit converts into that corresponding element according to a priority rule. The burst has a normal-looking cooldown and energy cost, and it slots into rotations cleanly. But it doesn't replace the core loop. It's there to add damage and extra elemental coverage, not to redefine how you play him. The stance remains the real engine. Talents. This is where the kit's rules get enforced. The structure of Varka's kit becomes way more obvious once you read his talents, because they basically spell out what kind of teams he wants. Talent 1. March of the Morning Breeze. ATK becomes element damage. This talent makes his obsession with ATK make sense. If you have a Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo character in the party, Varka gains. And a Nemo damage bonus, and a matching elemental damage bonus. And both scale per 1000 ATK. Only one element can power this at a time, and the total bonus is capped, but the implication is huge. Stacking ATK isn't just more numbers. It directly converts into damage bonuses that scale both halves of his mixed element output. That's why his base ATK and scaling are framed so aggressively. Talent 1 also locks in team structure buffs. The same talent also introduces the team composition checks that boost his stance damage. If either of these are true, you have at least 2 Anemo characters, or you have 2 characters of a same element among Pyro, Hydro, Electro, Cryo. Then Varka gets a damage increase to his Gale Rush kit, Normals, Charged, Azure Devour, and 4 Winds Arise. And if you satisfy both conditions at the same time, the boost becomes significantly larger. This is not flex slot friendly. It's basically telling you, build around the framework and you get paid. Ignore the framework and you're leaving damage on the table. The kit is rewarding structured comps over chaotic reaction soup. Talent 2. Vanguard of the Wind Banner. Swirl equals damage stacks. Then the second major talent pushes you even harder toward a Nemo synergy. Whenever nearby party members trigger Swirl, Varka gains stacks of Azure Fong Oath, which raises damage while Gale Rush is active. The stacks last briefly, can stack multiple times, and refresh as long as swirls keep happening. So consistent swirl triggers translate into consistent damage uptime, meaning Anemo teammates who can keep swirl flowing aren't just nice, they're actively feeding his personal output. Passive. Hymn of the Returning Wind. Overworld Convenience. He also has a passive that reduces the cooldown of Hold Gale's end based on how many Mondstadt characters you're running. But the game makes it very clear what this is. It doesn't work in Domains, Spiral Abyss, or other endgame combat modes. So this isn't a balance lever for his meta strength, it's just a quality of life perk for exploration. The Hexurai Hook, a talent that upgrades the stance loop. There's one extra talent, which is Eve Right, Morning Rain. That's basically the gateway into the Hexurai mechanic. After you clear the required quest, Varka gains the Hexurai tag. And once your team includes 2 or more Hexurai characters, you unlock an additional effect that directly upgrades his stance gameplay. In Gale Rush mode, whenever Varka's normal attacks connect, 4 Winds Arise gets its cooldown pushed down even further. In plain terms, it tightens the loop. More hits faster resets more casts. That's not a side bonus. That's a direct buff to the core engine of his kit. Constellations, same playstyle, more power, less friction. Varka's constellations don't reinvent him. They mainly do 2 things. Push his stance, damage higher, and remove bottlenecks so his best actions chain more smoothly. C1, more charges plus a burst moment. At Constellation 1, entering Gale Rush immediately grants an extra use of 4 Winds Arise. On top of that, after you enter the stance, you gain a bonus effect that makes your next 4 Winds Arise or Azure Devour hit significantly harder, basically a cash-out moment if you time it correctly. This doesn't change his rotation conceptually, but it rewards clean resource usage instead of sloppy button mashing. C2. Extra AoE pressure during a loop. Constellation 2 adds an additional AoE Anemo strike whenever you use 4 Winds Arise or Azure Devour. That's huge because those are the moves you're already spamming during his main loop, so it's effectively free damage stapled onto the actions that define him. It pushes him even harder into the sustained on-field carry role. C4, you start feeding the team too. At Constellation 4, Varka gains a support angle. When he triggers Swirl, nearby party members receive an Anemo damage bonus and a bonus matching the element involved. So now he isn't just consuming team support, he's returning value. But it doesn't turn him into a support unit. He stays the primary damage source. He just starts making the rest of the team hit harder while he's doing his thing. C6, the kit finally unchains itself. Constellation 6 is where the rotation stops feeling gated. After you cast 4 Winds Arise, you can use Azure Devour without consuming charges. Then, after using Azure Devour, you can cast 4 Winds Arise again, also without consuming charges. So instead of constantly managing limited uses, C6 turns his best actions into a near-continuous chain with far less friction. On top of that, Azure Fong Oath gets upgraded. Each stack now also boosts his crit DMG. So it's not only smoother gameplay, it's a direct scaling upgrade to the stacking mechanic he already wants to maintain. Signature Weapon. Built to amplify his natural behavior. His signature weapon is about as made for him as it gets. High base ATK plus crit rate substat. Perfect fit for how strongly his kit scales with ATK and how often he wants to crit. Attack speed increase. Matters more than usual here, because faster normals means smoother stance output and faster access to the actions his loop revolves around. On-hit stacking damage buffs. Since he's meant to stay on field and keep hitting, the stacks build naturally and refresh without you needing to play differently. And when Hexurai effects are active, those stacks also grant extra crit DMG, which ties back into the Hexurai mechanics found in his talent/constellations. Bottom line, the weapon doesn't force a new rotation. It just makes his existing rotation hit harder by rewarding non-stop uptime, high ATK scaling, and constant pressure. Final takeaway. When you put the whole kit together, Varka is a grounded, sustained on-field DPS built around heavy ATK scaling, structured team requirements, continuous action and cooldown cycling, and a stance loop that rewards staying engaged. He's not a plunge character, he's not reaction dependent, and he's not a burst-centric nuker. If you commit to the loop and build the team the way he wants, he pays you back with consistency and pressure. If this breakdown helped, subscribe, because when more details drop, I'll update the rotation, best team templates, and weapon/artifact priorities with actual recommendations instead of theory.